Hi, everyone. This is Joe Andrews here. I'm the person behind the Aquatics Talk Network now. We're expanding now with our weekly podcast where we do a one on one interview with somebody in the aquatics industry. So this week I had the pleasure to interview Jeff Fryer from Eugene, Oregon. Jeff has a long history in the aquatics industry. Was the aquatics director at River Road Park and Recreation District for a number of years. He recently retired from there and is now involved in a variety of other roles in the industry. I just had a blast talking to him, and I hope you do too. If you're interested in learning more about any of our projects, you can go to www.aquaticstalk.com, where we'll be posting more about this and other projects. For coming on this first time, we're trying this new project out I've been stewing over for a couple of months, and Jeff's just such a great guy that he's coming on to help us out. So Jeff, go ahead.
I'm just the guinea pig.
Yeah, you're the guinea pig, right? So Jeff, you've got a long aquatics career. So how did you get into aquatics?
Well, I grew up in what was the Panama Canal Zone. So we're talking, back in the mid to late 70s. And if you were an American dependent, a youth, because if you lived in the Canal Zone, your parents worked for the Panama Canal government, which was a branch of the U.S. government. There were no private employers. Everybody was owned. Everybody worked for the government. And so if you were a dependent, under 18, the only two jobs you could have was chuck the newspaper or work at your local pool. So I chucked the newspaper for 2 years. And then when I was 15, I started working at the local pool. I got stateside in September of 77. And after a couple months, my play money was running out. And so I actually got hired on at River Road in April of 78 as a lifeguard swim instructor. And so that was going pretty well. And then at the time, River Road had an adaptive aquatics program. And so I volunteered for that in conjunction with my paid hours and really enjoyed that. And so everyone's going, because I was going to U of O undeclared. So everyone, that's therapeutic rec. That's therapeutic rec. So I went ahead and declared therapeutic rec as my major. And as I started going through the process of earning that degree, I realized I wasn't excited about therapeutic rec. I was excited about physical therapy in the water. And so my senior year, I decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get a second bachelor's of general science and then apply to a PT master's program so that I can do physical therapy in the water. Well, then my folks died. My dad died in January of 1980, and then my mom died a year and a month later in February of 81. And so then all of a sudden I had to grow up like super fast. By then I had moved over. I was no longer at River Road. I was working for Willamette Lane Park and Recreation District in Springfield. And they had a full-time salaried position available. It was an evening coordinator, and it was $1,095 a month. It was like, wow, yeah, I'm rolling in the bunny. Keep in mind, this was the tail end of 1981. I think it was like September of 81.
Okay.
And so I started doing that. And it was fine. It was paying the bills, and I was having fun. But at the time I was drinking and using, and that wasn't a good mix. And so in January of 1984, I kind of messed up real bad. And Steve Cable, who some folks listening may remember that name, he was my mentor, and he sat me down. He goes, "You can go on probation, you can resign in good standing, or give me another option." And so I sat there and it's like, well, I think my drinking and drug use has something to do with my behavior. So in February of 84, I checked into, the local rehab place. And this is how I think. I'm going to learn how to drink and use responsibly. I didn't realize it was a program of abstinence, but
right.
So it was a 30-day plus or minus program, and I got out of it, and it was like, it's okay, I'm much clearer now. And then I kind of delved back into my responsibilities at Willamette Lane and realized that the pool gig was a pretty good gig. I mean, I could make a career out of this, and the rest they say is history. I was at Willamette
Nice.
Lane until 1990. Then I went to Grand Rapids, Michigan, and ran an outdoor summer-only water park for a season. And then the River Road aquatic director position came up, and it's like, well, I really enjoy Grand Rapids, Michigan, but I think let's go back home. Let's go back to Eugene. And so I came back to Eugene in June of '91 and was at River Road for a little over 30 years. Just left in January of 2022. So that's kind of how I got into it and a little bit of my history. So
Yeah. No, that I appreciate that. And that's a lot. That's I know it's interesting that like I think almost everybody out there almost has worked at Willamette Lane at some point. And I think about like all the people that I know and like my mentors were at Willamette Lane at different points. And so it's fascinating. And then, I worked there for just at 6 months and it was not a good fit at that time. And it's interesting to see, organization culture over time and how they change. And some people are the right fit at the right time, and then other people aren't.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, that's it's remarkable to hear all that. I really appreciate you sharing that. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen? So you got into this in the 80s and grow, as a lifeguard and a manager. What are some of the things that you've seen change over this last,
try the '70s, Joe.
first
I
mistake all year?
Yeah. Well, my first certification was the old American Red Cross Senior Life Saving. So that was, I mean, that just tells you how long I've been doing it. Because I think in '76, they changed it to advanced life saving and emergency care or something like that. So my first recert, I got the advanced life saving. But yeah, my original one was the little brown or little green book that was from
Uh-huh.
the '30s, and it was
Wow.
senior life saving. So I think the biggest change occurred in 1982, 1983, and really took off in 80 towards the end of '83 and '84, and that is when Jeff Ellis came on the
Mm-hmm.
scene. And I don't know how people feel about ENA, but I have nothing but respect for that man. He revolutionized our industry.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that was the biggest change. And then of course it's continued to grow and change, because now you have Dr. John Hunsucker with NASCO, the National Aquatic Safety Company. Jill founded SAI, Starfish Aquatics Institute. They've recently branched out to SAI and SGE, Starguard Elite. And what I really like about Starguard Elite is they have Dr. Justin Semsrott and Hawkins. What's his first name? Oops. Dr. Hawkins. They are medical directors
Mm-hmm.
specifically for Starguard Elite. And so a lot of the changes that are coming down are scientific based, not, well, that's how we always did it.
Right.
And so, yeah, so I think the biggest change was in the early '80s when Jeff Ellis introduced ENA, Ellis and Associates.
Yeah. And as somebody who came into the industry later, I could see those impacts. And um, I think ENA at times has had like gets a bad reputation,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I think they really, like we need those diverse voices. We need people driving change, and so people can actually like evaluate their own positions. And I think, I was, when very early in my first full-time career is when Red Cross shook up the boat big time with how they charge fees and everything else. And there was an exodus of a lot of people that are just like, I'm done with them. I'm not dealing with this garbage.
1984. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a little younger than that, but
Yeah, well, no, that's when they did it. I mean,
yeah,
because we were at the time at Willamette Lane, we were using the American Red Cross Learn to Swim program. And they said, well, effective whatever date, we're going to start charging $1 per participant card. And
yeah,
it was like, a dollar back in 1984 meant something.
Right.
And the only reason I wrote it was the Los Angeles Olympics. Um,
Uh-huh.
so we Steve and I and a couple of our lead people at Willamette Lane, we completely redeveloped our Learn to Swim program. Um, because again, anytime there's Olympics, your demand for swim lessons just skyrockets. And so we took, the Red Cross intermediate swimmer, advanced swimmer, and we made that bronze, silver, and gold to play off of the Olympics.
Yeah. And I think so it's interesting because I didn't get into Red Cross Learn to Swim programs until way later. My introduction to swim lessons was through a Swim America
Okay.
basically copy. Um,
Corvallis uses Swim America, correct?
So they used to. And so, for your, people that know, like my background, I started in Lebanon, and my first pool director, a guy by the name of Jeff Story, who was in Corvallis and then went over to Lebanon. There was some other stops in the way, but I think he kind of copied Corvallis's lesson program. Like looking at it, it's kind of the way I looked at it was like if you have two cousins that like grow up and you can see the common threads between them and where they kind of had the same family at the same time, and then they went different directions. And so that was kind of my fundamental, and I came into it through competitive swimming. So it's interesting as I've kind of gone the cycle of going more into Red Cross lessons with that little bit of a driver of like, let's keep it simple and like more Swim America focused.
Well, you talk about Jeff Story and links to Willamette Lane. He was at Willamette Lane when I started at Willamette Lane in 1980. So yeah.
Right. It's a small world here in the Northwest Aquatics, and I think nationwide, really. The more and more you talk to people, it's like, oh, you worked with this person who worked with this person. So yeah, it's fascinating. So swimming lessons is a whole nother thing that I don't think we've talked much about, but I know you were kind of running it there at River Road, and I've been loosely connected with swim lessons. And did you guys have, when you were at River Road, was it your own program? Was it the Starfish Aquatics, or was it something?
It was our own program. Before I arrived at River Road, Christine Crutcher had been there for several years. And then when she moved to Willamette Lane, Bill Kuzmer, the swim coach, he was halftime aquatic director, halftime swim coach. And Christine had done something very similar to what we had done at Willamette Lane and developed our own program. So at the time, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds were all grouped together, and they had their own curriculum. And then 6 and over were grouped together. And then when I got to River Road, I separated out 3-year-olds because the social dynamic, the interaction, the physical skill ability of 3-year-olds, wasn't, because you could have somebody that just turned 3, like 37 months, and then you could have somebody that's a month shy of 6. And that's a world of difference of what they're capable of doing. So we separated out the 3-year-olds. They had their own separate program. 4 and 5-year-olds had their own separate program. And then 6 and over had their own separate program. And we designed it so like the first 2 levels of the 3-year-old program equaled the first level of the 4 or 5-year-old program, and et cetera. The first 2 levels of 4 and 5 equaled the first level of age group. And so as they got older, it was very easy to place them in the correct class. It's not like they had to start all over again.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think, at least last time I've been looking at the Red Cross program, it's a little murky at times. And I know like Swim America program, kids get stuck at certain points because it's just the physiological development and stuff. And then I'm not as familiar with the Starguard or Starfish Aquatics program. And I think it's kind of in the middle, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, well, I think from the times I've looked at it, I think it patterns Swim America a little bit more with body position and roll and axis point and all that kind of stuff. But what we found because years and years and years ago, when Jill White was still with Ellis and Associates, she had developed a Learn to Swim program for ENA. And so we looked at that, and it's like, I don't think so, because our dilemma with the Red Cross, with the Ellis program, and then when Starfish announced their program, is that you kids could be in that first skill level forever.
Yep.
And so we took those first levels and in some cases broke them down into 2 or 3 individual levels so that there was some sort of sense of accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I think I see a lot of in our facility. That I'm, in Corvallis for the day job, and we have a gong that when kids pass their level, like a literally like a 4-foot gong, the kids
Okay.
come up and get to whack it
Whack
with a
it.
hammer when they pass their level. It is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it. And you just see the different kids that, the kids they'll go up and tap. And then the other kids that just come up there and just gung ho and like they're swinging for a home run.
Well,
Um,
during summer times, we would run 5 2-week sessions through the summer, morning sessions.
mm-hmm.
So, Monday through Thursday, 2 weeks. We've done 5 of those. And this one child, and his mom earned my utmost respect. So it was the end of session 4 or the end of session 5. It was towards the end of summer, and he still would not float. So he's still a shrimp. And, and so the recommendation was to repeat shrimp. And she took his report card and she was showing it to him. And she goes, "You are such a good shrimp. They want you to be one again."
Aw.
And I thought, man, you want a job? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's
yeah.
Yeah, no, some of those swim lesson parents are kind of interesting. Like I look at them and there's people that are, it's just fascinating to see the range of parents. And I don't know if, over time it's changed where you get some parents that are like, I mean, I've had parents like seen them getting in fights over
Oh, yeah.
like my kid should be passing this. It's like, well, they haven't done the skills yet.
Yep.
They and it's not that as soon as they do the skills, they can move on.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be able to get there until they can do the skills because they have to have those fundamentals.
Well, we always emphasize do the skills consistently. Because
Ah,
it would be, well, they did it last week, but they're not doing it today. They've got to, this is the expectation for the next level, that they can do this when asked, not when taking half the class to work up to it. So
right.
yeah.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. So thinking about the industry and stuff and aquatics, what are some of the things you think we're doing right now? Like we like to start with the positives.
Well, again, I have been incredibly appreciative of the information that Dr. Seth Hawkins, that's his,
mm-hmm.
and Dr. Justin Semsrod's done, because their research in how lifeguards address stuff is science-based. And
Right.
so all of a sudden it's, well, we've always done a stride, not to slam the Red Cross, we've always done a stride jump.
Right.
Like, do we need to keep doing stride jumps? And then the spine injury management techniques have really been revolutionized of late.
Mm-hmm.
That's all based on the science. It's like, look, if you strap somebody completely into a board and immobilize them, because that's what we were all trained and taught to
Right.
do, they can actually create further injury, because what's the atrophy, because they're
Mm-hmm.
stuck in a position for
Right.
hours, because doctors won't release them until they're completely clear. 911 just going to pick up the board and go. And so I'm in there. There was another aquatic director out of the Portland area, and she was actually backboarded. And she said it was like for 5 hours. She said it was miserable.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one would release her. And so, and I think listening to Dr. Semsrott and Dr. Hawkins explain where backboards came from, they came from World War II. It's like, okay, we need to get these soldiers off the battlefield. So instead of a stretcher, they would slap them on a board, and bada bing, bada boom, they would haul them off the battlefield.
Right.
And then all of a sudden that became protocol, for anyone with a suspected spinal. And so, where's the relationship between the two of them? The same thing with in-water respirations.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Ellis had actually advocated in-water respirations years and years and years ago. But it was the science that was presented by Dr. Semsrott that said this is why.
Right.
The drowning process does not stop until it's interrupted by the first breath. And so it's like,
Right.
that makes sense. So
Yeah. And you're seeing, and I think that's great. And I love that they're sharing that information.
yeah.
Like I got to go to my first AOAP conference last year, and, he was presenting. And it's not like it's like this secret that's only for the SGE facilities. It's for everyone out there in the industry. I'm sure they have some tricks and tips that they have, kind of that they're holding back for a couple of years until their facilities really dial in. But the reality is, it's we all, it's the rising tide lifts all boats, to use the analogy. And I'm really thankful that they do that.
The dilemma
But
you said with the other side of it is the resistance of people to embrace it and move on with it. Oh,
Mhm.
well, Red Cross doesn't do that. I mean, because not only have I'm still an American Red Cross lifeguard instructor and a lifeguard instructor trainer.
Right.
I've been ENA national staff. I've been Star Guard national staff. And so when I was going through one of my last American Red Cross instructor updates, I forget what page it is. I could find it pretty quick. There's one sentence. If rescue will be delayed, start in water ventilations. And it's like,
Right.
okay, what I think substantial. If there will be a substantial delay, start in.
Right.
And so I kept asking everybody, what is the definition of substantial? And
Right.
nobody could give a definition. And so a couple of people that contributed to the latest version of the American Red Cross lifeguarding manual, I know a bunch of those folks through my association with the Association of Aquatic Professionals. And so at one of the conferences, I'm asking them, so what is, this line right here? What is, we argued about that for days. And so nobody can give an answer. But yet, then you talk to Semsrott, here's the science. And so
Right.
I just don't get why people are hesitant. I don't know if it's an ego thing or a pride thing. It's all about, for me, PID care. I use the term PID, patron in distress. It's all about PID care.
Yeah.
What is the best care
Right.
I can provide for this person in distress? So
Yeah. And I think, it's one of the things where, I've worked at small facilities. I've worked at bigger facilities. I haven't worked at huge facilities, I would say. And we have to do too much. So it's like, I hate to say it, but I wonder if people think it's just too hard to like teach in water ventilations. Like I can barely get enough staff as it is, and I can get them to do what I need them to do. But to get them really nailed in water ventilations, like for a Red Cross facility, that's been my primary background. Is like, well, that's just too much work. And I think, to be devil's advocate a little bit, I could see where, substantial delay, I could see where that wordsmithing process, like, because my gut is initially, well, we should be getting these people out, 20 seconds or less if we have good zones and everything else. But the problem is that doesn't happen. So you have to train for it.
Well, and if you also remember, again, not slamming the Red Cross, but
Right.
it was only 4 or 5 years ago where they started using the extrication technique, where they used to do the whole hands on the board and then climb out with your hand on their hand so they don't fall back in, and then somehow you got to keep them there, but go get a backboard, and then which hand do I roll over?
Right.
So this was back at least 7, 8, 9 years ago. And because I still work at the University of Oregon. And at the time, the University of Oregon was a Red Cross facility. So they were doing some trainings. And so I timed it. And like, okay, from point of recognition to first breath. Okay? And this is a training situation where the guard's already standing on the side with the board,
right,
to rock and roll, the lane,
and not like checked out about finals and everything else. They're like, oh, I got to perform.
Yeah, the lane lines have been removed from the pool to make it easier to swim. 1 minute and 48 or 52 seconds. It was 2 seconds by either side of 1 minute 50. that person from point of recognition. So they have been not been breathing for almost 2 minutes.
Right.
And then I said,
Yeah.
okay, let me show you something. And
Right.
so from point of recognition to first breath was like 18 seconds. And so you
Right.
just saved all that time. And granted,
Yeah.
if they don't have a heartbeat, it's that oxygen that you're blowing into them isn't going to go anywhere. But at least you're preparing the PID for the next step of care, which is to start CPR and start circulating that oxygen that you've been blowing into them. So
Yeah.
I've been an advocate, and the science presented by Dr. Semsrott and Dr. Hawkins and SGE just confirms, that I believe that's the direction we should go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a lot more bought into that than I used to be.
And I am
So,
not on retainer, so I'm not getting
right.
yeah.
Right. Right. So now your involvement, since you've kind of retired from the one day job, because you've had multiple day jobs. So you're still working at, again, we're both acting not in like representatives of our agencies.
Exactly.
I should make that a disclaimer at the beginning and end of every show. But so you still get to play pool operator at University of Oregon, and pool operator jobs are just fun.
Yeah. Well, the best part is I don't have to deal with people.
Right. And you can make recommendations for budget of like,
Yeah.
this pump probably should be replaced.
Yep.
And the higher ups say, yep, great, you can get it. And you get there, you swap it out. Or if they say, nope, we don't have the budget for that, and then it goes out, you're like, well, I made the recommendation. There's not much we can do. And then you just go into, here's our options.
I've tried to have a backup of everything. But the giant 15 horse for the main pool, 338,000 gallon pool, I do not have a backup for that one. So
yeah, I'm seeing, through the pandemic and all the supply chain interruptions, like I'm getting more and more adverse about like having stuff on hand, even if it's a little bit of a gamble of warranties and stuff, because like I think, what is it? We're working on a generator project. It's by the time we get it, it'll be like 65 weeks.
wow.
And like it's been keep getting pushed back. We had a pump go down last year. So what? 21? No, it was this year. 22. Like right after a championship meet. It was for our outdoor lap pool, which our swim teams use and stuff. And mechanical seal plate and everything just started failing, and got through the meet and went through, and it was like 20 weeks before we got all the parts we needed to put it back together. Electrical parts, the same thing. I just saw a colleague of ours in Albany post on one of the Facebook groups, hopefully they have a contactor. And it's like, we used to be able to think, yeah, we can get that stuff, within a couple days. If it's in a UPS box, they can drop ship it. And, worst case scenario, we're down a week. But now I don't know.
Well, and here's an example of the whole supply chain thing. So November of 2021, the University of Oregon ordered a new set of blankets, pool blankets.
Okay. Yeah.
We took receipt of them October 13th, 2022, 11 months later. And it was like, oh my gosh, so yeah, so part of it, and that came from S.R. Smith, at the Canby. I mean, it's only up the road, I mean, it's like, come on. So
yeah, and I've seen that too. Like I was looking at, because we host a lot of competitive swim meets, so I'm looking at like redundancies, and we host, at various levels, the state championship meets, and so I'm looking at like a starter, and they're like, yeah, 13 weeks. It's like, well, it's a good thing I'm good at electronics, so if something goes bad, I can, field fabricate or repair to keep it going. But it's a whole different world, and I'll be curious to see if things improve, that we get out of that, and then people are looking at me as like the crotchety old guy that's got all the storeroom full. It's almost like, the people that went through the Depression era, that they're like resaving everything, washing off the aluminum foil. And
well, here's a perfect example. At the university, I am not allowed to change out pumps. I'm not allowed to change out
Mhm.
seals because,
Right.
you have to have a plumber, you have to have a laborer, and you have to have an electrician. And
Hmm.
it's like, okay. So because I had shelf stock, CO2 booster pump went out
Hmm.
55 minutes. It was less than an hour from the time
Yep.
I turned off the feeds until I turned the feeds back on. They had that thing out, replaced, wired back up, and so yeah, if you have that shelf stock, you're not waiting forever,
Yeah.
for a replacement.
Yeah. It'll be curious. I'll be curious to see if it ever straightens out, if we actually get to a point where stuff is easily available. And I don't, I'll be curious to see. I'm going to try to, as I work through this, I want to talk to some of the vendors a little bit more. I know a few people that will probably come on and talk and see if they get some different insights. But, jumping in, we're doing a lot of things right. I think we're going in the right direction.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you think we should keep working on and working on changing as an industry?
Yeah, I kind of looked at that question several times. For me, because at the twilight of my career, it's like, okay, well, what can we do? So one of the things, and you're aware of this, several states offer aquatic specific conferences
Yeah.
for their state delegates, for their state professionals. And so that's something I'm advocating. I mean, again, I've been saying no offense to Red Cross. Well, saying likewise, no offense to Oregon Recreation and Park Association, but their annual conference, maybe if we're lucky, has one or two aquatic specific sessions. And I think
Right.
this year there was like one fringe
Yep.
session. And so I think that one of our challenges is continuing education, continuing professional development for those that can't attend national conferences.
Right.
Um, and so that's something that I have been advocating for, pushing for. Or ORPA has given me the green light to distribute a questionnaire.
Hmm.
And so that was available at the conference on a Survey Monkey. We're also going to try and get that questionnaire out to the PAC, Portland Area Aquatic Council.
Right.
Not all those folks participate in ORPA.
Yeah.
So if we could have a 1 or 2 day conference, geared for the aquatic professional, or one of my proposals was day one was geared for line staff.
Hmm.
Those lead lifeguards. How do we utilize them better? What do they need to know to improve what they can contribute to your agency? And then the second day would be, for professional staff. Where are we going as an industry? So I
Hmm.
think that's at least here in Oregon. I think that's something that's pretty pertinent. Um, on a national level, I know that the MAC, the Model Aquatic Health Code, is been gaining more and more traction in various states and various areas. And I totally support the MAC because it gives some consistency nationwide. But
Right.
there's parts of that where it's like, to implement it, to maintain the standard of care, is cost prohibitive.
Right.
They want a supervisor on the deck at all times. And it's like, when I was at River Road, it's a 2 guard facility. So what am I supposed to move my desk onto the pool deck?
Right.
So there's presence there. And then the other one is that 4 hours of in-service.
Hmm.
During the pandemic, and not only during the pandemic, but the last full year before the pandemic. So, from January of 19 up until February of 2020, I would have high school aged guards that worked an hour and a half every other Saturday
Right.
at a recreation center. So they're working 3 hours a month, but I'm supposed to then in service them 4 hours a month.
Right.
And so for me, I think that's a challenge. How do we meet that national standard of care, but yet afford to be able to meet that standard of care? I don't know if that makes sense. So
It makes perfect sense.
yeah.
And you and I both were kind of involved with Oregon. We had a health inspector that was
Oh
really
yeah.
trying to push getting MAC adopted, at least in part. And then the pandemic and other things happened. I think one of the things that I'm working on, I'm going to submit to a bunch of conferences this year because I saw that like Oregon didn't have any real like direct aquatics promoted sessions.
Yeah.
So one of the ones that I I need to just pull the trigger on and get submitted is the true cost of implementing the Model Aquatic Health Code,
Yeah.
at least for here. And so I've got a couple facilities that I'm pretty good friends with, their whether it's their district director or their pool operators and stuff, and just sitting down and going line by line and building it out, saying, okay, here's the current codes, here's what it's going to take to hit compliance with this across small facilities, medium facilities, large agencies, and try to get a good grasp of that. And then whether or not that scope could include some recommendations of some low hanging fruit. I think that type of stuff is going to be, and maybe it's just because of my background, I feel like I can dive into that
Yeah.
as somebody who's been at little and big. And I think I don't know. I think you and I have talked about it before, that I feel like at a lot of these trainings and conferences, it's the same people going. It's not the people that are there that need to be there.
Exactly. Yeah. The people that go to these things are the people that are doing things well. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of, some of my goals over the last 6 months or so, of trying to just get stuff out there
Yeah.
and try to get people, where it's low cost. You show up, you can watch it later. And so we'll see if that happens. But with conferences, I know you've been a big advocate of the Association of Aquatics Professionals Conference and been involved for a bunch of years. And I don't think you're involved now, correct?
No, I'm still on the conference committee. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just not chairing it anymore.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
So, I went to the AOAP conference for the first time last year. What is it, like the 12th? I think we're at, like, it's been around for about 10 years now, hasn't it?
Well, the conference in February in Colorado Springs will be the 11th.
11th. Okay.
So yeah.
And I had heard nothing but good about it. And I finally got to experience it in St. Pete Beach, Florida last year. And it was just a great conference. It was very career inspiring to see. It's just aquatics.
Right.
And it's by aquatics people that know what they need.
Yeah. Well, an example of what AOAP meant to me, I went to the very first one 11 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that was a swift kick in my bottom that I needed to get reinvigorated and reproduce that passion for what I'd been doing for 30 years. And so to have that my last 10 years in the industry has been phenomenal. Because right. I know I was on the board for 2 terms, and my whole purpose was to give back to the industry that had given me so much. And there are tons and tons of people that either can't afford to go, choose not to go, and hence my desire to bring some of those national speakers to Oregon. Right. Something that's more affordable, something that's local, so you won't have the nasty transportation cost to fly across the country, especially now. So yeah, I think, professional development is critical. We talked about, one of the things was one of the challenges, and that, we talked about professional development here in the state. I think is, nationwide, because you're correct when you say the majority of people going to AOAP are already know and implement that stuff. And it's how do we get the ones that need to hear it to go? So.
Right. Yeah. And that's, like my instance this year, we have the budget for me to be able to go to AOAP, but I was denied this year because, well, we can't have you gone for a week because our staffing situation is so dire that we just don't have enough staff. We don't have a deep enough bench to have you gone for a week. Yeah. And I'm sure that's the case for other people. It's hard. It's hard to get away. It's important, but I think like with the overall staffing industry, I think that's one of our biggest threats is the staffing problems. I think looking at the up and coming people, I don't see a good path. I think my cohort is probably one of the last paths that had a good path.
Yeah.
Because, I was right. I had my first I was in my first full-time coordinator position when the ACA was implemented. And that's when we went from being able to have people working full time and continuing to up, their skill level and stuff to now 30 hours a week. And then the wages didn't catch up.
No.
And then inflation and cost of living and everything else has pushed it to where the people that really need to work, that have good work ethics, and I'm not saying that as a blanket, but generally,
Yeah.
they have to make a living, and we
Right.
can't provide that. you know
No, and you think we have it rough in Oregon? I mean, minimum wage that when they passed a couple of years ago, it's like it's going to be up to 1350 here in Lane County. I don't know if you're in Benton County, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't
Yeah.
know.
For the job is in Benton County. I live in Lynn County.
Yeah,
So
but for the
1350.
for the second tier counties, it's going to be 1350 here if it's not already 1350, and then for like Multnomah and Portland, the first tier, it's up to 15. So even if 15, can you make ends meet? And so, one of my things is I don't think they should have ever called it minimum wage. I think they should have called it entry level wage.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's up to you if you're going to stay at an entry level wage position forever, or if you're going to do what it takes to kind of progress. Because you say minimum wage, well, then I'm entitled to that no matter what I do.
Right.
Even if I goof off,
Mm-hmm.
as long as I don't goof off enough to lose my job, I'm entitled
Right.
to minimum wage. So
Yeah. Well, and right now, I mean, I flat out told people at the last in service, because I was doing dual hats up until about a week or so ago of running our lifeguard program and trying to be a pool operator, and wasn't doing very well at either one because there's just too much to do at the facility. I told him at in service, because we've been having call outs and things like that, is like, frankly, we need you guys more than you need us. If you guys could go out tomorrow and probably go get another job slinging cold pizzas for $2 an hour more than you're going to make here with responsibilities for training and keeping people safe. Mm-hmm. And that's just a problem. So I think that's where, as an industry, we, rethinking the economics of lifeguards.
Yeah.
But
as soon as something goes sideways, then all of a sudden that lifeguard is on par with the EMT responders. And it's like, well,
right.
Wait a second, Yeah. So
yeah,
it's a I don't know, cultural is the right stereotype. That has to change, where people see the value of professional lifeguarding. Because I've always, at least the last 10, 12, 15 years, I've always called them, my staff or my professional staff. I've really gotten away from calling them the kids. Well, the kids.
Right.
They are the professional staff that worked at River Road, or the professional staff that worked at University of Oregon Student Recreation Center, and so
right.
Just trying to change that narrative so that people understand there's a lot involved.
Yeah. I know I looked at it, if you take the common sense economic practice, what is it? You're supposed to, 30% of your income is supposed to go to housing.
Yep.
And so you work backwards from that. So you work backwards from 30% of your income. And let's just say we're going to be generous and have the assumption that we want our staff to have one roommate.
Yeah.
And so we plug that into our average rents, and we plug that into the maximum number of hours we can have them work. We're pushing around $16 to $17 an hour.
Yeah.
And so, I would say that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be at the entry level at that, but the people you're expecting to really do the heavy lifting, they should be able to, 30% of their income, cover half of rent and living expenses in the community you're in. Yeah. And so I think, that's kind of another project for another time that I'm kind of working on, of building that formula and looking at the cost of, what does it cost to put a lifeguard in a chair? The agency I'm at now, it's about $1,000 for their first year without any coverage.
Yep.
So
I know that for years at River Road, we always did in-person training, because then I knew I could document this is what they heard, this is what was presented. And
Right.
then, slowly and surely, because of the time commitment, they started moving to web-based trainings. And so, are they listening? Are they paying attention? I mean, there may be a 3 to 5 question quiz at the end of it, but what is the retention? And so, um, that was a battle I fought for years. And and then say, well, we can do Bloodborne Path. It's like, yeah, but if you read the OSHA requirements, OSHA requirements specify it has to be site specific.
Right.
You can do a canned training program for Bloodborne Paths, but there has to be that component that enables it to be site specific. Where is the exposure control plan kept? Where are the PPE kept? What are your individual work practice controls and your individual engineering controls? And people just, here, watch a video.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, and that's where I see motivation as let's do better online trainings. Like the tools have come down a lot. The things that we can kind of pick and choose where we can say, yeah, bloodborne pathogens works, but we can put together, like we made a change this last year for our annual all staff where you have to go through all the HR policies and everything else. We did it over Zoom last year, and now we use that recording every time because then it can be a little more site specific. This year, as we go back in person, I still think I'm trying to figure out a way to mix that, because then we put a little bit of effort on the front end to make it look better, make it more engaging, make it sound good. So it's not just, another boring video. We can get a lot more value out of that over the course of the year to free up somebody of having to go through, it's that head guard level. I say head guard, that has different connotations, but it's the person you trust to bring on a new person. Yeah. But they're tired and they're got school finals, so they're going to go through the slideshow and whatever and tell them, and they're going to just kind of buzz through it. Whereas if we put a little more work on the front end, we can actually make something that is a little more engaging.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Always the
challenge. What, right? What, you got a couple favorite memories you want to share from working in the industry?
Yeah, I'm going to share one. It has a bad word in it, but it doesn't make sense unless I use the bad word. Mm-hmm. So, I have been in the industry since September of 1975.
Okay.
In February of 2015, we had a fatality at River Road.
Okay.
Literally 52 days later, so that would have been, I think, April, sideways, everybody knew what the expectation was. So 40-something years, 41, 42 at the time, and my biggest compliment and my biggest validation of what I've been doing was being called an ass. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that one sticks. That sticks with me, because there isn't a lot of validation in this profession. So,
yeah, it's a lot of thankless work a lot of times. And there's little moments that are fun and little things that, like, okay, I can make it through the day. I think one of the things that it's always fun to talk to people about is what is something that, like, I don't know, did you ever watch the show Parks and Recreation?
A couple episodes, not a lot of them.
So they did good, especially once they kind of found their legs, about stuff that's just like, I've been in that meeting. Like I've been there. And people are like, that's so absurd. There's no way that actually happened. Do you got a story that you could share?
I was going to say that's your next question, and yes, I do.
Yeah, exactly. The things that people think is just made up. There's no way that that's true, and it's. I think those are the fun ones that are the best.
Yeah. So this was back. I think I'd been at River Road maybe 10, 12 years. It was earlier on. It wasn't towards the end of my time at River Road. Staff member came up. She wanted to talk to me. It's like, okay, yeah, what's up? And she goes, well, I'm thinking of getting a breast augmentation. And I'm like, the first two thoughts in my head was, don't look down. And then they didn't teach me this in supervisor school,
Right.
and it's like, I mean, why are you I said, so I'm assuming that if she was going to follow through with it, that she would need time off because she couldn't get in the water. So I didn't know where she wanted to go with it. So she wanted my personal opinion of whether or not she, and it's like, I can't, I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, don't look down, don't look down.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, so if people, that definitely people would think that was me. Nope, nope.
No. As somebody who's managed lifeguards, I'm working at my desk and I just hear this converse. That does not surprise me.
Yeah,
That does not surprise me if somebody walking in and saying, "What do you think?"
yeah.
That's beyond the scope of my practice right now, so I'm gonna
Yeah,
defer to other people.
exactly. Yeah, that one definitely was a surprise. So
Wow, that's
yeah.
awesome. That's
Yeah. So if I ever tell you, like in a conference or a meeting or something, if I ever say don't look down,
yeah.
you'll now know what I'm
Now
referring
I know what
to.
you're talking about.
Don't look
Exactly.
down. Yeah.
Well, we've been going about almost an hour now, so I
Okay.
just, the last wrap up question, what are you looking forward to this year? We're in what, November, so it'd be,
Yeah.
approximate year-ish.
Well, I know that we've talked about it a little bit. And now that I am semi-retired, I really, really, really want to see something developed for the professional staff in the state of Oregon.
Yeah.
So what I would really like to see in the next year would be an aquatic specific, whether it's a 1 day or 2 day workshop, just something.
Right.
Having been involved with AOAP for 11 years now, I do have a lot of contacts and I can get
Yeah.
national speakers out here, you know, at a lot less than their normal speaker fee. And so, still airfare could be prohibitive, but, if we could get people to hear some of the stuff that they don't hear because they don't participate in a national level, that's what I would like to see over the next year. And then what we were talking about earlier too is, validating the importance of what a lifeguard does, and,
Yeah.
make the compensation, uh, commensurable. Is that the right word?
Commensurate?
Commensurate. Yeah, commensurate. Yeah, whatever. Big
I'm a,
words,
I'm a
man.
pool guy,
Big
not an
words.
English major.
Yeah, we're pool folk, man. We don't know big words. Then
So
when this goes live, people can put it in the comments. You bonehead.
yeah, exactly. That, you know what? And I just say, I'm like, I'm glad I shipped it. And that's the thing that I've been, July 1st was the first time I did those Friday Q&As.
Yeah.
And I've gotten some really, like, I've actually have like new friends now from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's great. And it's people from like, Sheridan, Wyoming and Oklahoma and Chicago. It's like, this is just great.
Well,
So
then, if the aquatic specific symposium gets off the ground,
yeah.
maybe one of those folks want to come out and do a maintenance oriented session.
Yep.
So yeah, I might be hitting you up for that.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, Jeff, thank you so much. I'm going to
Not a
go ahead
problem.
and we're going to wrap the recording now.